Hey everyone, Bob Thibodeau here with the Ask Bob podcast, and we're here to answer your podcasting questions. Now, we've been talking about what kind of podcasts are the most popular formats to have right now. And I introduced the subject yesterday or on the last episode. Now, today we're going to begin explaining the one-on-one interview. This is the most common form of podcasting. If you can book an interview, especially with a very well-known person who can give tremendous value to your particular niche audience, you can grow your podcast, your business tremendously. And there are a lot of podcasters who use this particular format, but the catch is you have to be a good interviewer. Now, some people, they'll stumble and, and things like that. And it just sounds absolutely terrible. They put these fillers in there that are just terrible. It distracts from what you're trying to do. So you need to practice your communication skills. And there are many podcasts out there where the host is not a good interviewer, and it shows. I use an interview format for my podcast, the Kingdom Crossroads podcast. I usually take at least as much time to prepare for the podcast as the length of the podcast, and usually longer. What do I mean by that? Well, the typical interview is about 45 minutes long. I make 2 episodes out of it because I keep it under 30 minutes. But let's say it's 45 minutes long. I usually take an hour to an hour and a half just in preparation. I have an interview form that is part of the scheduling process that the interviewee will fill out as part of their scheduling process. And it has all the basic information, the contact information, of course, and all that. But it also asks for the main topic of the interview, the reason the person wants the interview. What is it they want to discuss? And the reason for that, let's say they may be the owner or manager of a huge nonprofit that's doing tremendous work. Well, you'd think we're going to talk about that, right? Well, maybe the person wants to talk about a new book he's just published. So that's what I need to focus on during the interview. This isn't for me. This is for them and the listeners, right? I will, of course, discuss the nonprofit and ask a couple of questions along those lines, but it's just really to establish the background or the authority for the interviewee. Then I jump right into the questions about the book. And in doing my preparation, I'll usually take the information they provide, including the website and LinkedIn and Facebook and Google their name, Google their business and things like that. But the best place for me to look, though, is always on their website. I'll look around on almost every tab they have, especially the About Me page. I look for some interesting fact that's on that page that almost has nothing to do with the book, the business, or anything else, because there's something that they'll tell in their story that probably nobody else has ever asked them about. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't spend a lot of time on that one question, but I'll insert it somewhere during the interview. Maybe something like, one question I have for you. Did you really get lost for 2 days in the jungle in the Amazon rainforest? I mean, something that's on there really doesn't have anything to do at all with what we're doing, but it just makes them more personable. And usually I'll get a chuckle, or something like that and say, wow, yeah, I've never been asked that. That's awesome. And then they'll explain what happened. After the interview, I have almost always been complimented by my guests about the quality of the questions that I asked during my interview time and on my interview skills. Some are icons of influence in their industries, and they're complimenting me because of the interview. So, they'll tell me it's been a long time since they had anybody interview them at that level that had actually taken the time to learn about them. And that's what sets you apart. That's what can make you an expert in interviews. Now I get contacted to do interviews almost all the time. I'd say 95% of the interviews you hear me do on my podcast, the Kingdom Crossroads podcast, they're reaching out to me. I used to have to reach out and try and find people to agree to come on the podcast. Now they have their agents and their admin assistants and themselves are contacting me because they want to be interviewed on our podcast. So that's what you can do. You can establish a great reputation if you're good at the interview. And that's how I know I'm following my passion for the podcast that I'm doing. I spend the time to adequately prepare for each guest individually. You need to do the same thing. Don't just say, oh, I got an interview of 15 minutes. Let me look at their website real quick. And they've had the 3 to 5 questions they're looking at you to ask on the information form. Okay, I'll just ask those questions. And you just boom, 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 boom. And they can tell you did not prepare at all. And your podcast, your interview will sound like you did not prepare at all. You don't want to do that. Spend the time. Prepare individually for each individual podcast interview you're doing. Do not ask the same generic questions. Make it specific to that individual. Okay. Now, there are times when things come up and I am not able to prepare adequately like that. I'll try and reschedule the interview. I'll tell them some things that come up and is cut into the time where I was not adequately able to prepare for their interview. And would it be okay to reschedule? 99% of the time, no problem. Because this is their interview. They are doing this to present themselves to your audience. So remember that as well. And you can do that. You can make the time to adequately prepare and become a quality interviewer. And that one-on-one interview format will launch your career. It works. That's why it's the most popular method out there. All right. Next time, I'll be discussing the solo commentary podcast. That is also a popular one. And actually, that's what I'm doing right now. But we'll talk about that next time. Now, if you find these videos helpful, give us a rating and comment down below. It also helps others to find this information as well. Social media just picks up on that. So thank you in advance for helping me to get the word out about this program. Of course, over these articles and videos, I want to answer any questions you may have concerning podcasting. You can leave your questions in the comment section down below, but a better way of communicating with me and making sure that I'm able to see your questions rapidly is to use a contact form on our website, which is podcast-training/contact, or just podcast-training.com and hit the contact button up at the top of the menu. Fill out the questionnaire and send me your questions. If your questions are used on this podcast, I will give you the credit for bringing it to our attention, and you will receive a free download of my book, The Complete Guide to Podcasting. That's a $37 value, and you will receive it for free if you send along your questions and they're used on the Ask Bob program. If you include your website or podcast information, I will go one step further and put a link to that in the show notes down below. Who knows? You may see some increased traffic to your website, your podcast, your purchase forms, just by asking a question about podcasting. So, and if I get the same question, the first person to ask gets the credit. So if you have a question, don't wait. Ask today. Go to our website at podcast-training.com/contact and fill out the contact form. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast in order to be notified when a new episode is being published and a new question is being answered. All right. So tomorrow we'll be talking about on the next episode. It might not be tomorrow, it might be a couple of days, but the solo commentary podcast is next up on the list. We'll talk soon. See you then. And remember, keep talking. You're awesome.